So, what is consciousness? I mean, really, for decades, science has been kind of split between these two big rival theories. But today, we're diving into a new idea that might, just might, finally bring them together. It proposes that your entire experience of the world, it's actually just your brain's best guess about what's out there.
I mean, think about it for a second. You get a paper cut. Your brain gets all this information, right? Data about tissue damage, where it is, how bad it is. But you don't just, compute the data. You feel it. You feel that sharp, annoying sting. There's something it is like to be you at that moment. But why? Why does our inner world have this subjective, qualitative feeling at all?
And that question right there is what the philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem. And let me tell you, for decades, it has completely stumped scientists and philosophers. It's created this huge divide between the main theories trying to explain our inner life. Okay, so to really get a handle on this puzzle, we first need to look at the two main pieces. These are the big players, the dominant scientific theories of consciousness. And they come at this problem from totally different angles. So on one side, you've got integrated information theory, or IIT. This idea says consciousness is all about a system's internal structure, how deeply its parts are interconnected and affect each other. Then on the other side, you've got global neural workspace theory, or GNW. This one argues consciousness is about function. It's what happens when information gets broadcast across the brain into a kind of global workspace for all the other parts to access. So, is it about internal structure or is it about global access? That's been the debate. Now, here's where things get really, really interesting. There's a third, more fundamental idea that might just help bring these two rivals together. And it all starts with the most basic drive of all: survival. Okay, stick with me here. This is called the free energy principle. The core idea is actually pretty simple. To stay alive in a messy, chaotic world, any living thing, from a tiny cell all the way up to you, has to act like a prediction machine. It has to constantly build and update a model of its environment. And the whole goal is to predict what's coming next and avoid surprise. Why? Well, because out in the wild, surprises are usually bad news. And this diagram here shows you exactly how it works. It's a continuous loop happening all the time. Your brain uses its internal model to predict what it's about to see, hear, and feel. Then it senses the world. And finally, it updates the model based on the difference between its prediction and reality, what we call prediction error. So you see, it's not just passively soaking up information, it's actively trying to figure out what's causing its sensations. So if the brain is basically a prediction machine, what on earth does that tell us about consciousness? Well, this is where a brand new framework comes in to connect all the dots. It's called Integrated World Modeling Theory, or IWMT. The main claim of IWMT, which comes from researcher Adam Safron, is that consciousness isn't just integrated information and it isn't just a global workspace. Get this. Consciousness is what it feels like to be a system that is actively generating an integrated, coherent model of the world. In other words, the experience is the model. That's the whole ballgame. But here's the thing. For a model to actually feel like a world, it can't just be a random jumble of data. IWMT says it has to have a specific structure, a set of foundational rules. The information has to be organized around things like space and time and cause and effect. And, crucially, there has to be a sense of a self that can act in that world. Without those building blocks, you don't have an experience. You just have static. And this next part is absolutely key. The world model isn't there for you to just sit around and philosophize. It exists for a purpose: to guide a body, an embodied agent, through the world. This theory argues that consciousness only shows up in systems that don't just process information, but use that information to control a body and act. So you could say consciousness isn't for thinking, it's for doing. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, but how could a squishy brain actually build a model like that? Well, to get at the mechanics, IWMT borrows a couple of really powerful analogies from the world of AI and engineering. Let's start with an idea from AI. There's a type of AI called an autoencoder that learns by taking an image, squishing it down to its most essential features, and then trying to rebuild the original image from that compressed code. The brain might be doing something similar, but in what's called a folded way. Higher-level parts of your brain are constantly sending predictions down about what you should be seeing, while your sensory areas are only sending up the errors, the parts that don't match the prediction.
And this is what makes the whole system just unbelievably efficient. Your brain doesn't have to waste energy processing every single pixel of reality every single second. It pretty much just pays attention to the new stuff, the surprises, the things that break its predictions. The whole system is basically built to be a novelty detector.
But, the brain's a messy, noisy place. So how does it get one single, stable picture of the world out of all that biological static? IWMT uses another cool analogy for this, the turbo code. In telecommunications, turbo codes are a really clever trick for pulling a clean, perfect signal out of a super noisy channel. And the theory suggests the brain is doing something very much like that.
It pulls this off through synchronization. Different parts of the brain start firing together, in rhythm. When they do that, they create what's called a shared latent space. You can think of it like a virtual conference room where all these different brain regions can compare their notes, correct each other's mistakes, and agree on a single unified story of what's going on. And that final, agreed-upon story, that is our stream of consciousness.
So, what does a theory like this mean for the future of consciousness research, or even for creating artificial minds? Well, it makes some very specific, testable predictions that really set it apart from the old guard. Now, this table really lays out the differences in a crystal clear way. Look at this first row. Requires embodiment? Both of the older theories say no, but IWMT says yes, absolutely. You need a body, or at least a very rich simulation of one, interacting with a world. It's also more optimistic about conscious AI than IIT is, but with a big catch. The AI has to be building the right kind of world model for an agent. So the bottom line is, consciousness isn't just about raw complexity or broadcasting information. It's about the specific content and the purpose of that information. And maybe one of the most profound takeaways from all this is that consciousness might not be a simple on or off switch. Instead, it could be a spectrum. A system could be more or less conscious depending on how deep, rich, and coherent its integrated world model is. Think about it. A worm, a dog, and you, we all have world models, but they vary massively in their complexity and detail.
So that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. If your entire conscious experience, everything you are seeing, hearing, feeling, and thinking right now, is simply what it feels like to be your brain's best guess, its integrated model of reality, what kind of world is it modeling for you at this very moment?